Whoops, not getting any power. There we go. This chart right here is showing the pressure, the blood pressure, in the various types of tubes. So you should know all of these, what all these words down here mean. The aorta is the largest artery coming out of the heart. And the blood pressure in the aorta, there are actually two pressures that you use when you measure blood pressure. The systolic pressure is the pressure when the left ventricle contracts and pushes blood into the aorta. The diastolic pressure is the pressure when the left ventricle relaxes. And obviously there's not as much pressure when the ventricle relaxes because there's not blood being pushed into the aorta. So that pressure is lower. And blood pressure is measured in what we call millimeters of mercury. And you see in the aorta the pressure should be about 120/80. Those are the highest pressures that you encounter in the aorta. Now, the way blood pressure is measured, it usually uses a little cuff like this. And in the old days, they put the cuff around you, and you guys are going to get a chance today to measure your blood pressure. To see if you have high blood pressure or not. And here's the way you do this. Now watch this carefully. You take the cuff, you put it over your left arm. Now you ought to do this without a sleeve on if you can avoid it, because the sleeve is going to interfere with the measurement of the pressure. So I probably won't get a good measurement here, but I'm just showing you how to do it. You put the cuff on so that the tube is coming out at the bottom, coming out where your elbow bend is. If you get it backwards, the tube's coming out on top. That's no good. So get it so the tube's coming out on the bottom, and you might need your friend to help you. And you just, it's Velcro. And you then sit comfortably. With your arm resting on something, like the lab table in there. Okay? And then you have the other end hooks up to this little hole in this machine, and this computer will listen for the pulse that's going through the artery that comes down your arm here. And it pumps a bunch of air into this thing, and then when the computer starts, it'll slowly let the air out. And when the computer starts to hear a sound, that's your systolic pressure. And when the computer stops hearing a sound, that's your diastolic pressure. And the computer will convert it to what the pressure would be in the aorta. From what it hears, it'll convert to the pressure in the aorta. You see? So it can figure out your blood pressure. So it sounds a little like this. You hit the button to get it started. Just try to remain calm. Putting air in it. I can feel pressure on my on the cuff here. Ah, it came out. Oh. All right, let's start over. Okay, starting over. They have machines like at CVS where you can do this. Has anyone ever done it? Yeah. Okay, I got a lot of pressure in my arm now, and it's waiting. And it's sensing. Slowly releasing the pressure. Probably not a good idea to be talking when this is going on. You can feel the pulse in your arm while it's happening. Almost there. 134/88. That's a little high. course, I have this shirt on, and that might be messing it up. But the older you get, the higher it's going to be, because old people have high blood pressure usually. Because over a lifetime of eating all of that McDonald's and stuff, you build up cholesterol and fat in your veins and arteries. Even if you don't look fat, it can happen. I look like I'm in prime physical condition.
What's the ideal number?
120/80 is about what you guys should have. It'll vary. It varies some. I have high blood pressure in my family, so my whole family's a little higher. And you got to be careful of that. And as you get older, you should measure your blood pressure at least probably once a month. And as you get, just go to CVS and stick your arm in there. And if you ever see it get really high, you know you might have problems. And most people are on blood pressure medication when they get older, and you live longer with blood pressure medication. That's one reason why people live longer now than they used to. Yeah.
Low blood pressure be bad? Or
Low blood pressure, yeah, that could also be bad too, but most people don't have that. Now, these electronic instruments are made for older people with a little bit higher blood pressure, and I've seen some people that are, especially very little people with a weaker pulse, it doesn't get a good measurement on. So it might not work on some of y'all. You can always go to the nurse. Miss Byers can take your blood pressure, and she does it with a stethoscope. You can listen for the sounds. You watch the gauge as you lower the pressure in the cuff. Watch the gauge go down and listen for the sounds. And it's probably more professional to get somebody who knows what they're doing to take the measurement. Miss Byers could do it for you at any time. So anyway, you can see that the pressure is highest here in the aorta, and it gets lower as the blood moves away from the aorta. It goes into the large arteries, then the small arteries, then the arterioles, and then the capillaries. And after the blood squeezes through the capillaries, there's almost no pressure at all on the blood pushing it back to the heart. And the large veins and the vena cava that come back to the heart have very little pressure pushing the blood along. So how's the blood get there if there's not much pressure pushing it? The valves, that's right. There are valves in the veins that keep it going in one direction. They don't let it go backwards. And so because those little valves, it has to keep moving only forward, not backward. And there is a little bit of pressure there, it's just not very much. So that's interesting. Blood pressure. They talk about it, and you can read about it. Skip this part. Okay. Oh, by the way, your brain is always monitoring your blood pressure. It has sensors in the aorta and in the carotid artery. That's the one in your neck. And there are sensors that tell the brain how high the blood pressure is. And the brain can send signals to the heart to slow the beating of the heart or make it not as vigorous and lower the pressure. So the brain is always trying to adjust for high pressure.
Is there any chance that it could misread it and kind of overdo it?
I guess possibly. Maybe if high pressure runs in your family, that's what it's doing. It's set. It has a different set point. And high pressure will end up killing you. Lots of people die early in life because of high blood pressure. What it leads to is it leads to arteries that burst. Because there's just more blood than is meant to be. A higher pressure of blood in that artery, and sooner or later, arteries that are under high pressure will burst, and you end up with stroke or a heart attack, and you end up dying. And lots of people, they don't like to go to doctors, and they don't like to take any drugs or anything like that, but they still eat a lot of salt. They're not exercising as much because they're older, and the blood pressure goes up, and often they're obese, and they don't want to take any medicine, and you end up dying from some sort of stroke or heart attack or something related to high blood pressure. So you should, throughout your life, you should watch your blood pressure. One of the reasons why people live so much longer nowadays is blood pressure medication. There's a direct correlation. And so some people are real stubborn about it and just don't want to take it, but it's probably something that most of you will have to do. Guys more than girls. Guys have more of a problem with high blood pressure than girls. Okay, look at all these vessels. I'm not going to make you memorize all the vessels for the test. Just the ones that are on the ID sheet. Okay? These are the arteries in red. And look at the ones going into the head. There's the carotid artery, the big artery that goes into your head. It kind of runs along the sides of your neck. That's the one you can feel. Have you ever taken your pulse by feeling the side of your neck? Anyone ever done that? That's your carotid artery. There's all these different, the book just talks about all these different types, all these different arteries and veins, and we're just not going to go into them all. There's how they look coming down into your arm. We have to know a few of those. The brachial artery is the big upper arm artery. These are words you've heard before. The radial artery is next to your radius. The ulnar artery is next to your ulna. Look at the way the arteries are in your hand. It's kind of interesting to look at the way the body's kind of wired. So I just have you know some of the major arteries. You know, you got to know this stuff if you're a doctor. I remember I was sliding down a tree when I was a kid. I kind of was climbing trees and I fell out and I grabbed the tree and I was sliding down like that and there was a nail in the tree.
Ow.
And sticking out and I was holding on like this and I was sliding down and it just cut my leg. Right about there. And I was just bleeding like crazy. And ran into my neighbor's, one of my friend's house, and I ran in there and I called my dad and I said, "Oh, I'm bleeding like crazy." And he said, "Well, where was the cut?" And I told him where it was. And he goes, "Great place to cut yourself. Don't worry about it. You're going to be okay." Because he knew that the main artery runs down the middle of your leg. It's not right there where I got cut, you see. And so I just cut veins. And veins aren't at as high a pressure, so they don't bleed as bad. And the bleeding did stop pretty shortly. I had to get stitches, but he knew I wasn't going to die. If you cut an artery, the blood will spurt out. Every time the heart pushes, some blood spurts out. If you cut a vein, the blood just kind of oozes out. That's a good way to know if you've cut an artery or a vein, if you ever get cut. Either way, you want to cover it up so that it stays in your body and doesn't all come out everywhere. But if you cut an artery, you might be in big trouble because of the high pressure, you can lose a lot of blood quickly. You can die from loss of blood.
When my brother was little, we were watching BB guns in the yard, and probably shouldn't have been, but he accidentally got shot in the neck, and it was like half an inch away from his carotid artery. And when it started bleeding, it was squirting out.
Was it squirting?
Yeah.
Did it cover it up?
Yeah, my dad had to get a paper towel.
He survived?
Yeah. It's still in there to this day because they couldn't take it out. The BB is.
I wonder which one it hit. One of these maybe.
Yeah, probably.
Yeah, if you hit that big one, you're in trouble. And here are the veins. Now the big vein running down your neck is the jugular. You may have heard of that one. That's a big vein. If you cut that, you could bleed it out a lot, and that could be bad. But again, it wouldn't be as bad as the arteries. You can see how some of them go over the top of your skull, and some of them go underneath your skull. There's veins running down in your arm. You can see the veins. Look at your wrist. See the little blue vessels? You can see them in my wrist. Little veins. Veins are usually a little more superficial. Yeah, you can see it on the back of your hand too. A little more superficial, a little more towards the skin than arteries. Arteries are kept deeper because they're a little bit more dangerous. You can see the vein that goes over the top of your hand there. Interesting. Here are the veins coming from the digestive system, and this is something interesting to note. Here's the digestive system. There's the stomach and the intestines. Here's the small intestine. It cuts away a lot of the small intestine so you can see the vessels. And here's the large intestine, and notice that these veins come from the intestines and from the stomach, and they all go here into this big vein called the hepatic portal vein. And that leads into the liver. And the reason for that is anything you eat that gets into your bloodstream goes straight to the liver to be dealt with. The liver is a giant organ for dealing with poisons. And if you eat something that's poisonous, the liver will break it down pretty quickly and make it not so hazardous. And so the liver allows us to be able to eat a lot of different things that might kill a normal individual. For instance, caffeine. Caffeine is a poison made by plants to keep insects from eating it. An insect that eats a leaf that has caffeine in it will immediately die. Caffeine is very dangerous. It is a killer poison. But your liver can deal with it, and so you can get a pretty good amount of caffeine and not die. It's just good, you know. I'm wide awake now. So what would kill an insect, the caffeine, you can deal with because your liver. And there are a lot of things like that.
What about over a long-term effect? I mean, everybody drinks Coke a lot.
Yeah, you can drink several Cokes a day, and the caffeine still won't bother you because your liver breaks it down. You could drink alcohol, and the liver breaks it down for the most part. Now, if you drink alcohol all your life, if you drink too much caffeine, you could eventually get a liver disease. People who are alcoholics have really bad livers usually by the time they get older. And the liver does a lot of stuff for you. And if your liver is diseased and it stops working, you'll die from some other poison like caffeine that normally wouldn't kill you. And the liver does a lot of other stuff too, so you don't want to ever get liver disease. So don't become an alcoholic. I know it's too late for some of y'all. Huh? It's a joke. We'll talk more about the liver when we do the digestive system. And here are all the different veins. Again, veins blue, arteries red. You're only going to have to memorize the ones of these on your sheet. You don't have to memorize all of it. Okay, so I kind of went through to the end of the chapter since we aren't going to meet tomorrow. And we're going to do the diseases on Monday. And on Tuesday, we're going to have a heart dissection. And on Wednesday is going to be anatomy. And on Thursday is going to be the test. Does that sound exciting? No? I want to show you a little video about a guy being shot through the heart. And then we'll go do IDs and do our blood pressure. And you're too late. Shot through the heart. Very nice. Who sings it?
Bon Jovi.
Yes! Look at y'all knowing some classic music.
The chances of saving someone who's been shot through the heart are grim. But imagine a small town doctor whose hospital does no heart surgery, who doesn't have any of the right equipment, who hadn't opened a chest in 20 years, facing a 15-year-old boy bleeding to death from bullet holes in his heart. Here's what happened. Nashua, New Hampshire is like many towns in New England, quiet and laid back. But one afternoon just after Thanksgiving, a gunshot shattered that tranquility. And the bullet would lead to a surgery that Dr. James Squires would never forget.
I was in the basement of a man's home who operated a barber shop.
getting a haircut. As I was sitting down in the barber chair, my beeper went off, and I answered it. It was a message to call the emergency room. I did. They said they had a gunshot wound coming in.
A 15-year-old boy named Jamie Backus had been visiting a couple of friends. One boy had somehow gotten hold of a handgun. As he showed it to the others, the gun accidentally went off, hitting Jamie in the chest.
Just the impact of being hit by a .38 at close range is tremendous. I doubt that he was inhibitory. It certainly not for very long. His friends actually deposited him on the street and then called the ambulance.
Jamie was rushed to Richmond Medical Center, a small hospital in southern New Hampshire. Dr. Squires arrived there within minutes.
It's not something that I'll probably ever forget. This was a boy.
2 or 3.
He was, that time, probably slightly younger than my youngest son. He was lying on a stretcher. There were all sorts of people around him, including anesthesiologists, nurses, lab techs, and so forth. And when I walked into the room, he spoke to me. I spoke to him, communicated. I asked him if he was having pain. He said a little bit in his chest. And then I got to work to try to figure out what to do.
Jamie's mother, Kathy.
I mean, how do you feel when something like that happens? You think that on TV things happen, not in real life.
As Kathy hurried to the hospital, Dr. Squires began to realize how serious Jamie's wound really was.
I examined him. He had what looked like an entry wound in his chest, just to the right of the breastbone. And then I examined the x-ray, and you can see a bullet, and you can see the shadows of the blood.
Dr. Squires had to plan heart surgery, an operation he'd never done before. And at this small regional hospital, no major heart surgeries had ever been performed.
Our hospital just isn't equipped to do that. Whatever we were going to do would have to be done somewhat primitively. I couldn't think of anything else to do except operate. There's no other alternative except to watch him bleed to death.
Dr. Squires had to inform Jamie's mother that her son probably wasn't going to make it.
I didn't know if he was going to live or die, especially with the odds 9 to 10. No, I just didn't think he'd survive.
Dr. Darrell Erickson, another general surgeon, was called in to assist.
I got an urgent call from Dr. Squires. Basically said, we've got a bad gunshot wound in the emergency room. Meet me in the operating room right now. The nurses were just in the process of setting up the room, getting instruments ready. I said, we've got to get into this guy's chest and get him opened up. And the nurse said, we're not ready. And I said, it doesn't make any difference. The last time I'd seen cardiac surgery was about 20 years before that, during my residence.
Without the aid of a bypass machine, and with only a knife instead of a surgical saw, the doctors proceeded to open Jamie's chest.
So we split the breastbone, and with a retractor, opened up the chest, and it suddenly became clear what had actually happened. He had been shot in the heart.
But miraculously, the heart was still beating.
Immediately, we knew that we had a functioning heart.
But for how long, no one could say. Michael Barb assisted the doctors in the frenetic surgery.
I wasn't sure that he was going to make it. He'd lost a lot of blood. He had a hole in his heart.
We could see a little place, a hole in the heart, and the blood was just sort of squirting out of it.
My first task given to me by Dr. Squires was to put my finger in the hole to stop the bleeding. And at the time, the heart was beating. And it's an interesting feeling to hold the heart in your hand and feel a human life beating.
The physician's assistant who was working with me wisely said, well, if it's one going in, there's probably one coming out.
Probably used in Oklahoma colloquialism, where it goes in, it's got to come out.
We lifted up the heart. Sure enough, there's a hole in the backside.
Dr. Squires was now faced with not one, but 2 potentially fatal wounds.
We decided that we're just going to have to close these holes with stitches. Then you have to do it with some support because the muscle, particularly on the right side, is thin. If you just sew it, the stitches tear through. Then you really have a test. This is a one-shot performance. It has to work or this boy's going to die. You get your hand roughly in sync with the heart at just the right moment. You put the needle in and hope it comes out at the right place, which it did.
As he sewed the delicate stitches, Dr. Squires was awestruck by the beating heart that lay in his hands.
The heart is doing something, and to see that and feel it, touch it, is in fact touching what could be considered the very essence of what it means to be alive.
As difficult as the first wound was to repair, it was nothing compared to the hole in the back of Jamie's heart.
I'm looking up a little bit and trying to get the stitch in on the back side of the beating heart. Just a little difficult to get everything coordinated in the right manner.
Finally, both holes were closed, and Jamie's heart was still beating.
Once we had finished closing the second hole, the mood in the operating room was one of kind of joy, elation, to the fact that, yeah, we've done it.
But that elation was tempered by doubt. Dr. Squires wasn't certain what to do next. So he left the operating room and placed a call to a heart surgeon at a medical center 2 hours away.
I wasn't sure about what kind of drains or where you put them. That's what he advised me on, and I followed his advice.
This kid stands a chance of surviving. Had we not done what we've done, he would have been dead by now.
Today, Jamie Backus leads a normal life.
Dr. Squires really did a great, fantastic job saving me, and reacted really well to the pressure at hand.
We had about 20 or 25 people, from the ambulance to the technicians to the physicians, the anesthesiologists to the nurses, all of whom focused strictly on one thing, getting this young man through this experience. Very few things in life are ever like that.
After a difficult recovery and 4 years, Jamie Backus had the chance to meet Dr. James Squires, to shake the hand that held his heart.
I don't think you really can thank someone enough for saving your life. It's not like getting anything materialistic. It's like a gift of life. You can't put it in words.
We'll be right back with more vital signs after this.
Yay!